Never has the game combined excellent graphics with heart-stopping action, a super slick, realistically mapped, and ultra-violent Alone in the Dark, a horrific humdinger of a PS1 game for Halloween. A groundbreaking horror experience shook the gaming world and all of its 90s cheese-filled action tropes.
Chris Redfield.
But how did a small development team, an inexperienced Shinji Mikami at the helm, and a production studio's first ever title develop this massively well-recognized horror franchise? Let's find out. The year is 1993, and Biohazard is in its pre-planning stages. In the 90s, game companies were so big and filled with money that Capcom had what are known as planning rooms, mini-game development studios that worked up concepts and visuals. Capcom Production Studio 4, also known as Team Horror, was selected to begin developing what was known as, at the time, a remake of another game, Sweet Home. It would be criminal not to talk about Sweet Home in this video because it is fundamentally the most important building block of Resident Evil's overall creation. Sweet Home is very important. That's right, Resident Evil would have never existed if not for the creative liberties introduced by the man, the legend, Shinji Mikami. Shinji was assigned to make concepts of a game set in a similar mansion that is found in Sweet Home, with horror elements and the like. Oh, but that is somewhat of an understatement. Sweet Home is very similar to Resident Evil 1. Puzzles, door loading screens, inventory, death animations, and the list goes on. Outside of the impactful inspiration from Sweet Home, Shinji also stated in an interview dated in 2003 that he was absolutely obsessed with George A. Romero's cult horror classic, Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead.
He says he watched it in junior high and it burned into his memory forever. Shinji was desperate to make a game in the same likeness as the film, but it was impossible due to the technology at the time. He states, "It made me daydream about living in a realistic world in which zombies appeared. Like, what if it was me who was in that situation? Well, I do this and I do that." A Game Informer interview revealed that during its first 6 months into development, Shinji worked tirelessly, days on end, to come up with characters, original gameplay mechanics, and ended up with 40 pages for a script which, hey, felt like 5 pages thanks to zingers like this.
What is this?
What is it?
Shinji designed the mansion to have the same look as certain rooms and elements from the Overlook Hotel found in The Shining. He came up with zombie designs from, you guessed it, the 1979 horror flick Zombie, with an I. 1 year into development, and things began getting hectic. On the development side of things, the team ran into various amounts of technical issues that almost put the creation of Resident Evil in jeopardy. Developed for the original PlayStation, they only had a PlayStation in their grasp for testing for 6 months. 6 months. So inevitably, they had a mountain of issues on figuring out the actual capability of the console. The team's ideas just couldn't fit the small amount of graphical memory on the PlayStation. They wanted the entire Star Squad to move with the player. Essentially, we'd have Alpha Team with us at all times, motion capture technology, 3D environments, and a high polygon count. The game was extremely toned down compared to what was initially planned, and perhaps the game-saving mechanic was the door loading screen. The door mechanic saved up so much memory and worked as a mask to allow the game to reset the UI, enemy count, and item management without carrying any baggage from previous rooms. Ever notice how you'd only find other characters in completely empty rooms? That's because the game was toned down. Otherwise, we would have had a very clunky AI, and I'm thanking the developers for not implementing it anyway. So here it goes. Thank you. And at this point, we're 27 months into development. But here's the problem. Capcom wanted the technical aspect of the game to be completed within 18 to 24 months. Developers missed that deadline, and the general feeling was this game was doomed to fail expectations. It's August 1995, nearly 2 years into development, and the very first beta build is released to game journalists and publications. There's some pretty obvious differences in Biohazard's first beta build. You can only select Chris and Chris. The game loads up and you'll spawn right in front of a creepy, non-reactive Jill Valentine. There's no inventory mechanic, so you have to cycle through weapons by hitting one button. Zombies are pretty similar to what you'd find in the final build, but there are hunters found pretty early on for some reason. Kenneth's corpse was also switched out to the statue room looking as dead as ever, and I can only imagine what the reaction was from the press once they got their hands on this build because, I mean, they must have been really shocked by what they were witnessing. It is pretty violent for a 90s game. Whatever they'd seen was good enough to build up hype, reception was well met, and Capcom's marketing team started production on the infamous live-action trailer. Ah yes, the 90s nostalgia is kicking in. And of course, the circle has been met. Remember when Shinji Mikami dreamt of making a live-action experience in his junior high years? Well, it was obviously his idea to make a live-action, well-acted, and clearly dubbed advertisement/introduction to the game. The production started in late 1995, and I'm assuming that the beta builds were enough to make Capcom happy, thus giving the team enough of a budget to shoot this thing. It was shot in Tama River in Tokyo, Japan, and those interesting character intro scenes were shot in the studio. Jill's actress, known as Inzi in the credits, was actually still in high school during production and had zero film experience. The cast unfortunately had a mosquito problem while filming, but hey, it was well worth it considering they had no idea how big this game was going to be. In fact, no one actually could have anticipated its impact days before its release. Takuro Fujiwara, the man that selected Shinji Mikami to essentially lead the design of Resident Evil, said he only expected the game to sell maybe 200,000 copies. Shinji himself was hesitant. He stated in an interview that, during the time we were making it, my personal feeling was that Resident Evil was not a game that should be made into a series. Imagine that. Imagine never having Resident Evil 2. Capcom shared the same sentiments as they did not expect the game to be a success. Well, on March 22nd, 1996, Resident Evil completely smashed expectations, was critically acclaimed, and went on to become a bestseller in the United States and the UK. As of now, the game has sold over 2.7 million copies, far, far, far away from its expected 200,000 copies. You know what, guys? This is why I love Resident Evil, because it was a passion project, and Shinji Mikami and Team Horror, who were, by the way, new guys, worked hard and loved the content behind the game itself. That's what made it successful. It was treated right and was never going to be a cash grab. I mean, hell, it was not expected to sell more than a few 100,000 units. But my favorite part of doing the research behind this video, the very first beta build had this strange generic horror soundtrack that was played in every room and every hall. The fact that they chose to kill that and go with complete silence in some rooms to make the game organic was a masterstroke by the dev team. Resident Evil 1 will always be known as a benchmark for horror games. What is your favorite part of Resident Evil 1? Be sure to comment down below your thoughts and suggestions for other how it was made videos. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, stay single.